Welcome back to Shaboom, the podcast all about and for baby boomers. I'm Rick K. Jones, your host and guide. We're now in the middle of what we call in the South the dog days of summer. It really comes from the fact that if you know about hot dog's breath, that's what it feels like when you walk outside, and that's where the dog days come from. But summer in the South and summer everywhere is and can be a lot of fun. So today's episode is all about summer and summertime. For baby boomers, summer vacations were a big deal. I grew up in a little suburb of Atlanta called Avondale, and Avondale was one of those Norman Rockwell type communities. While we were very close to the big city, we were a teeny little town. It was a little mill town, in fact. Scottdale Mills was a cotton mill. The town of Avondale was built like an English village. It was built kind of like Stratford-on-Avon with that type of architecture downtown. And it was a town that you could get on your bike and ride all over town and go places, go to the lake, go to the pool, do a lot of things. It was really fun. I'll tell a funny summer vacation story at Avondale High School. Avondale High School, in DeKalb County at the time, you had elementary schools that were grades 1 through 7, and then high school was grades 8 through 12. So we didn't have any middle schools. So there's a big difference between an 8th grader and a senior in terms of age and all that. Well, Avondale High School was laid out in 3 wings. And so it was like 3 separate long buildings that were connected by breezeways. And you exited outdoors at the end or on the sides. Okay. Well, my senior year, the last day of school, we decided to pull a prank on the 8th grade wing, the 8th and 9th grade wing down closest to the football field. And so we quietly padlocked all of the doors with chains and locks on the outside. And so when the bell rang to get out of school for the first time, people hit those doors and they didn't move. They were locked in. Well, later we saw kids push windows open and crawl out windows because they couldn't get out. I think finally somebody came and cut the chains with a bolt, but it was a funny story. So our first song on the playlist today is a classic song from that period. It's Alice Cooper's song, School's Out for Summer. You always got a summer job. I mean, my generation, we always had a job. That was expected of you. You were going to go to work in the summertime. You didn't have to go to school, so you needed to go to work. And I was fortunate. I had a paper route and had a paper route for about 10 years. But I also cut lawns. For my 10th birthday, and I was born in March, my dad gave me a new lawnmower because I was wearing his lawnmower out, cutting all the widows on my streets, lawns. And I had a regular, system of cutting grass for a lot of little old ladies, and always had money from that standpoint. And so, it was easy for me to be able to get up in the morning early, go cut grass, make some money, and then have the afternoon to play ball or go to the pool or ride bikes or build forts or do all the kinds of things that we did in that era. There's a wonderful song on our playlist by a guy named Eddie Cochran called The Summertime Blues. And so we hope you'll enjoy that today. Later on, we moved to Kansas when I was in high school, and we belonged to Brook Ridge Country Club. My dad was a golfer, and he joined this country club, and I found that I could swim for golf balls. People kept hitting balls into the lakes, and we would go out and swim for balls and then clean them and sell them back to them. And so I would set up a little, swim in the morning, pick up all the balls, set up under a tree, and sell golf balls to people. And that later, when we moved back to Atlanta, I went to work after my senior year for the Decatur Parks and Recreation Department, again, cutting grass, in this case, cutting municipal grass in the parks and all that. And then the following summer, in the summer of 73, between my freshman and sophomore years in college, I went to work for the DeKalb County school system. We had a family friend named Harry McWilliams who was in charge of all the maintenance of all of the schools in DeKalb County. And in the summertime, when we didn't have school, you would wax floors and you would clean gum off of where people had stuck it under desk and do that kind of work. And it was really a great job for that. We've got another song on our playlist called Summertime in the City. It's by John Sebastian and a band called The Lovin' Spoonful. In the summer of 74, I went to work on a shrimp boat. We're going to tell that story in a few minutes. And then in 75, I went to work at Camp Ridgecrest for boys. It's funny how I ended up being a counselor at Camp Ridgecrest. I went to Georgia Southern, and I had a wonderful professor who taught American history named George Shriver. And Shriver did something really fun the first day of class. He stood up on the first day of class and said, "I want you to know that everybody in the class gets a B." And he said then he was done with his grading because everybody that stood up and high-fived were the C students. And he noted that. And everybody that came after class and bitched, they were the A students anyway. So he was done, and he could get on with teaching history. Well, George Shriver had worked at Camp Ridgecrest for boys in the mountains in North Carolina, up at Black Mountain, North Carolina. And we had become friends, and there was a camp director named Rick Johnson, and Rick came through Statesboro to recruit counselors to come work at the camp, and George graciously invited me to dinner to meet Rick Johnson, and I agreed to come and be a counselor. I'd never been to Camp Ridgecrest. I knew nothing about it, never had been a camper, never had been a counselor. Well, about 3 weeks before I got there, Rick Johnson called me and said, "Hey, listen, would you consider being a tribal leader?" And I said, "Sure, I'm happy to be a tribal leader. What's a tribal leader?" And he said, "Well, a tribal leader has a bunch of counselors reporting to him in a certain age group. You have a certain tribe. They were all named for Native American tribes. And would you be that?" And I found that to be interesting, that I'd never been there, never worked there, and yet he saw enough in me to make me a tribal leader. And I got to be really good friends with the other tribal leaders. I think there were some camp counselors that were a little bit offended that they had worked at camp for a number of years and were not invited to be a tribal leader. It turned out that John Cook, who's a good friend of mine, who's an attorney in Raleigh, he had to clerk that summer. He couldn't come back. He was supposed to be the tribal leader of the Arapaho tribe, and he couldn't come back because he had to clerk, and that's how I ended up getting the job. And I had planned to go back to Ridgecrest after my senior year before I was going to go to work, but fate, as it often does, interrupted. I went to student teach in January of 1976 because I wanted to coach basketball. And I got hired at the school where I went to student teach, and I did not finish my degree. So I had to go back to summer school and finish my degree. I had a couple of buddies that went to graduate school at Georgia Southern that summer, and all they did was lay by the pool and have a big time while I'm taking human anatomy and a couple of other hard courses to get out of school, but I was able to do that. So summertime always reminds me of a lot of really, really good times. One of the great things about growing up in the South in the summer is for about 3 months, you didn't have to wear shoes. Everybody went barefoot. I mean, I can't remember wearing shoes in the summertime. You were always out with the grass between your toes. And I can even remember riding my bike, which is stupid, without shoes on, and riding barefoot and doing all those kinds of things. And so we've got a great song on the playlist today called Barefootin'. This is the version with Jimmy Buffett and the great Alan Jackson. My guest today knows a lot about bare feet because he runs a charity that tries to help children that don't have shoes, that are forced to have bare feet. My guest is Manny Ohonme. He's the founder, president, and CEO of Samaritan's Feet. Manny and I got to know each other when I was working for the National Association of Basketball Coaches, where we did a wonderful event every year at the Final Four where our coaches would work to donate shoes to underprivileged children in those communities where we held the Final Four. I'm going to let Manny tell his story because it's fascinating. So please welcome my good friend, Manny Ohonme, today to the show. Hey, Manny, thanks for joining us today on Shaboom.
Hey, man, it is such a joy to actually be here with you. You're a role model to many people, and I count myself just blessed to have you within my world.
Well, I've been always blessed to have you in my life. I want to start from the beginning. You know, we ask all of our guests to kind of start with their childhood, and yours is unusual because your childhood is in Africa. So, talk about that and your migration to America through basketball.
Rick, I grew up in the first generation Christian family. My mom was the first ever Christian on my family tree. Growing up in Nigeria, our family had financial challenges like many kids that grew up in the neighborhoods that I grew up in. I used to wake up every day and say, God, would you bless me with 001? That means it's okay if you don't give me breakfast or lunch, at least give me supper so I can make it to the next day. We were so poor. Many kids in my neighborhood, we didn't have shoes. At the age of 9, growing up, my responsibility is to help my mom go sell water and soft drinks at parks where athletes should come play sports. And one day I showed up at that park to go sell water and Coca-Cola, and there was this group of Americans that came there that day with this little weird looking ball. It was orange. See, in my neighborhood, Rick, everything that's round and bounce, we kick them. This one they were playing with hands. They call it basketball. And these kids were having so much fun as they were playing. I saw, man, this chance. I want to join them because I've never seen anything like this. So I put my basket of water down and soft drinks, and I want to join them. But because I was a street merchant, they shooed me away. And so I stood on the sideline watching all these kids having all this fun, and I was so disappointed. But all of a sudden, our Providence will have one of the balls that we're playing with roll by where I was standing. And I quickly had a decision to make. I could take this ball and throw it back into the court and watch them play, or I could kind of sneak in and join them. So I chose to do the other one. So I kind of snuck in and started joining them, and all of a sudden we started dribbling the ball and passing the ball. And out of all this craziness, this missionary from the state of Wisconsin called David, he stopped all of us. He said, boys and girls, we're going to have a shooting competition. He said the prize for the winner is going to be a new pair of tennis shoes. And that place lit up like a Christmas tree. And every kid was screaming, pick me, pick me, pick me. And I was one of the few kids that got picked that day. And I truly believe angels was working on my side because I never played basketball in my life, Rick. And I threw the ugliest shot in the world. And that basketball went in the net. I ended up winning the competition, becoming the first person in my community to own a pair of tennis shoes. It was crazy. And this man called me to the front to present me the shoes, and all I wanted to do was just take off. And right before I was going to take off, he grabbed me by my shoulder, and he said, son, just because all you see around you is poverty doesn't mean the God of the universe has forgotten about you. He said, keep dreaming and keep dreaming big. And after I said that, I took off. Rick, I ran so fast, I forgot my basket of water. It was so crazy.
What a fact that planted multiple seeds. I mean, it planted the seed of basketball. It planted the seed of, I don't have to accept where I am in my life. And it planted the seed of shoes as a vehicle to reach young people.
Amen. He did.
Wow.
He did. It did. And I can see that as the foundational building block for who I am today as an individual. Shoes, the gift of shoes has become a catalyst that's transformed my life because that game of basketball, and that's become one of the most powerful tools right now, took me from poverty in Lagos, Nigeria, to college in North Dakota, Rick. That's another part of my story that people thought, you're nuts, you're a Nigerian boy. What are you doing in North Dakota?
You obviously didn't read any travel brochures. You go from one of the warmest places on the planet to one of the coldest places on the planet.
Rick, I had 5 scholarship interests in America. I said, I'll pick the one with the best looking brochure. So I picked North Dakota. Then I learned my lesson. I said, Africa people should not live in North Dakota, man. But it became the best decision that I ever made because I ended up meeting my bride there. But that taught me that basketball could take me places. And he did. I mean, he's taking me places. He got me to get my undergrad, my master's degree, even got 2 PhDs, and got into software and technology business in the United States, changed my life. And how Providence will have it. My father struggled a lot with alcoholism, and even growing up in Nigeria, Rick, my father would be so mean and sometimes unkind, because when people that struggle with addiction, the ones that are closest to them the most are the ones that are hurt the most. And I still remember my father would beat me and say mean and evil thing, and my mom would come behind him and put her hands on my head, and she'll say, in the name that's above every other name, whatever mean and evil thing this man says to my son will never come to pass. And I'll tell her, why do we have to live so poor? And here's the lesson I would promise my mom I'll always share. Now, she'll take me by this little window of my house. And she says, son, look outside and tell me what you see. And I said, Mama, I see trees. She said, no, son, look higher and tell me what you see. And I said, Mama, I see clouds. She said, son, you're not looking higher. And tell me much higher and tell me what you see. And I said, I see the clouds. She always say, you ever wonder why God created the sky so high? And I said, I don't know, Mama. And she said, so poor boys like you can dream real high. I said, never make excuse for life. And because of that, I've dreamed so much. I dreamed so much when my father passed away that I had to go back to Nigeria. And that's when I saw the need. That's when I saw that over 300 million kids wake up each day in Africa with no shoes on their feet. That's when I learned that over 1.5 billion were infected with diseases because many of them didn't have shoes. That's when I said, what if I can start coming back to help children just like that, so they can also have hope like I've received? So I came back to America, talked to my bride, Tracy, and I was in the technology business. She was the corporate travel business. And 5 years later, we started this organization called Samaritan's Feet, with a vision to go put shoes in the feet of 10 million people. And we said, we're not just going to give them shoes, Rick. We're going to wash their feet like Christ commanded it, because greatness got to be modeled through a position of humility. That we want to teach great people in life that it's got to start from the position of humility. And when we wash their feet, we treat their wound, we speak into their life, we ask them their dreams, and we remind them that there's a God in heaven that has a plan for their life, that wants to transform and change it. And these shoes that was a catalyst to change my life, I want to also present that to you today, to begin this new journey of hope, to remind you that you were created for greatness. And Rick, we've now served almost 12 million people today because one man came to Nigeria 40-something years ago to inspire hope in this life of this young African child. And that's the power of what Samaritan's Fit is. We're now inspiring hope, which is advancing health, advancing by creating opportunities, advocating for peace and access to education. And to think about over 630 plus U.S. cities and community, plus 113 countries around the world, because one man braved probably the crazy advice of people, don't go to Africa, you're going to die. Never realized he was going to inspire hope in this kid. And now this kid's now impacting millions, to the point that this kid's now actually created a company that's now manufacturing shoes, creating jobs, creating an opportunity for people so they can actually participate in this power of being able to, in this prosperity that God has promised us. So Africa has got to get to a point where we're not waiting for aid anymore. We want to teach them what development is, because when we can create the next generation of middle class that can earn an income, that can start their business, they can change their community, and then one day change the world.
There's no question. I have a former business partner named Ron Cook, and he was son of a Church of Christ minister who was the dean of men at David Lipscomb College. And Ron has a wonderful line. He says, coincidence is when God chooses to be anonymous.
Come on, I love that.
Isn't that great? Because we both, as men of faith, we don't believe in coincidence. We believe in divine providence.
Come on.
That there was a reason that man was there, and you were in that park at that moment, that has led to all this greatness. And you and I became friends because of Ron Hunter. And so, here's Ron Hunter, and I don't know the seed of the story. I'd like you to tell me, but he was on the board of the NABC when I was working for the National Association of Basketball Coaches, and he coached a game barefoot when he was at IUPUI. Talk about that, how he came into your life and how that happened.
Rick, the first 3 to 5 years of Samaritan, so we had a vision to go serve 10 million people. And being a marketer and being a business developer, I said, man, this is going to take us 100 years to get to 10 million. And so I was actually fortunate. We got connected to a very well-known painter called Thomas Kincaid. And he partnered with Samaritan's Feet because he wanted to go paint the Rockefeller tree light in New York, and he needed a charity. So we said, hey, we'll sign us up. We're part of the deal. We'll get some art, we'll get some money, and it will help launch us nationally. So we were excited. So we flew to New York, and we got to New York. And while he was painting, the folks from NBC called, said, we're sorry we can't have him on today because something is broken in the news. And we were devastated because we planned everything around that being a national launch. So we started picking up calls, me and my director of marketing, Todd. We started calling a bunch of media companies, and all of a sudden someone from Fox News called us back, said, if you guys can get here in the next so many minutes, we'll get Thomas Kincaid on. So we packed up all our easels and everything, got into the Chevy Tahoe, ran down to the Fox network there in New York City. We got there, Rick, set everything up. Thomas Kincaid, the late Thomas Kincaid now, he got caught up in the moment. He started talking and talking. He talked so much he forgot about us. And I looked at him and I looked at Todd. I said, what just happened? This was supposed to be a national launch. And I got mad. I said, Todd, change my ticket and fly me back. I said, man, you can't fly back home because you give your word you're going to be at an event tomorrow. I said, man, don't hold me accountable to that stuff right now. So I thank God for friends that will hold you to your word. And you also be obedient enough to listen to their instruction and counsel. So we went to this event next day, Rick. It became the defining moment in my life. Guess who they were honoring by the Gabaron Foundation out of Spain? Dr. Maya Angelou. I walked into the room, and Dr. Angela looked at me at the back of the room, and she pointed at me and said, you, come over here. And I looked behind her and said, are you talking to me? He said, yeah, you, come over here. He said, you must be from Nigeria. I said, man, how in the world do you know where I'm from? She said, I teach at Wake Forest, and every year I go back to Liberia, I fly through Lagos, and I see that smile. Yep. That's a Nigerian guy. He said, Manny, I want you to go be courageous. He said, what do you do? I said, I wash children's feet all across the world and give them new shoes to go inspire them to go live a great dream. He said, that reminds me of somebody courageous that I used to work for. I said, who's that, man? He said, that was Martin. She just said, just like that. I said, who's Martin? She was talking about Martin Luther King
Dr.
Jr.
King.
She said, I want you to go be courageous just like he was, to go be the face and the voice for kids with no shoes. And it was like God sent it to me that day, Rick, to inflate my deflated balloon. So we went back to our hotel by Madison Square Garden, and I still remember Todd and I said, what is something courageous we could do? And I said, what if we can get a Division I basketball coach to help us coach a game on national TV with no shoes? And I said, that's a brilliant idea. So I said, oh, let's call Coach Mike Krzyzewski. He said, no, there's not a chance Mike's going to do that. Let's call Roy Williams. There's not a chance. And then Todd said, there's a guy in Indianapolis called Ron Hunter. He said he uses basketball as a metaphor to teach man how to become great in life. He said, let's call him. Rick, it was 10:30 at night. I learned a lesson that you don't call a basketball coach at 10:30 at night. So he called his phone, and Ron Hunter picked up the phone. He said, who is this? And I said, this is Manny and Todd. He said, why the heck are you calling my phone at 10:30? Because he thought something was happening to his players. So I said, Coach, we just met with Dr. Angelo. And he said, we need to be courageous, and we want to have a coach that can help us coach a game on national TV with no shoes. He said, where are you guys? We said, we're in New York. He said, are you drunk? He said, we're not drunk, Coach. He said, Manny, I want you to fly down to Indianapolis, come meet me. Something's wrong with you. So I flew down about 7 or 10 days later, and right behind him, Rick, was the biggest poster of Dr. Martin Luther King I've ever seen. So I said, man, this brother's been set up. I said, you know who this man is? He says, I bought the picture. I said, what do you want me to do for you again? I said, I want you to help me coach a game. He said, I don't even play on ESPN or national TV. What do you mean? I said, we just feel like you're the guy that's supposed to help us do this. He said, if you're willing to be obedient, God will make a way. And he said, man, I don't know if I can do this. I said, Coach, he said, I thought I'll invite you here. He said, maybe I'll help you raise 500 shoes, maybe 1,000 shoes. But I said, Coach, I want you to help me raise 40,000 shoes in honor of Dr. King's anniversary. He said, you crazy, Manny. I said, well, for 2,000 shoes, you don't need God. But for 40,000 shoes, you're going to need a God that's bigger than you. He said, man, you must be really crazy. He said, all right, let's pick a date. So we picked a date. Rick, it was the 24th of January of 2008. And by game time, Ron Hunters helped us raise 110,000 pairs of shoes. By the end of that year, 200 and some thousand pairs of shoes. And because of that, somehow they invited me to come present him an award at the John Wooden breakfast that AIA and FCA put together to honor him for what he's done as part of his involvement with the NABC and NCAA. And I went and presented this award, and Ernie Johnson was there, was the host of the show, and he said, I was watching all this stuff break on national TV, people calling name Peyton and all these people donating shoes. And he said, what can I do? I said, you're Ernie Johnson. You can do whatever you want to do. So he said, I don't know what I can do, but I'm going to call you back in a few days. 7 days later, Ernie Johnson called me and said, I talked to Turner Sport. They want me to have you on national TV during playoffs to come talk about this. So I showed up that day. Ernie Johnson, Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith were all barefoot. Adidas and Nike donated shoes. All these people donated money. And right after I finished sharing my story, there was a guy that walked up to me, said, I think I can give you 1 million shoes. I said, don't tease me. He said, I think I can get you 1 million pairs of shoes. Well, to cut the story short, this gentleman was connected through one of friends of Kenny Smith, which was connected to a relationship that a couple of the NBA players were working with these new shoes they were going to launch through Kmart and Sears. They ended up donating 1.3 million pairs of shoes, valued over $30 million. What I thought, Rick, I was mad that day in New York City because NBC canceled and Thomas Kincaid forgot us. 430 media outlets worldwide ran the barefoot story, put Samaritan on the map overnight because what we thought was a mistake by Thomas Kincaid got used as a setup to launch Samaritan or something much bigger. So that's how I got connected to rock.
Again, no coincidences. The connections that you've had, and if you look back, I mean, you can't. If you look back and you say, "I'm going to write this story," nobody would believe this story.
It's
I mean,
crazy.
no one would believe the things that have happened and the numbers. Again, you have wonderful children. I have wonderful children. I now have, 3 grandboys. The thought of a child not having a pair of shoes in today's world is unacceptable. The thought of a child not having a meal is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And, the work y'all are doing is amazing. You recently got back from Africa with the NBA. Tell me about that story and what's happening through that partnership.
Yeah, so we actually we teamed up with the NBA, their NBA Players Association, to go to Morocco as part of an initiative to take about a dozen top and up and coming NBA players that wants to learn about impact investing to see how can they use their platform to bring change and transformation to the world. And they were looking for an example of an individual that's created a social enterprise, a nonprofit that's actually now evolving to a global for-profit that can actually both, have a means to be able to connect with people that wants to make charitable contribution to do greater good, but also has created a model for generating profit, for creating jobs and stimulating economic development. So I went and shared my my keynote at the big university there in Morocco with them, and we got the chance to dream together for them to kind of talk about what their strategic plan and what they want to be able to do to impact the world. And from that, actually, I'm hosting a couple of the guys here at our headquarters in Charlotte next week, where we want to launch a Friends of Nigeria initiative to be able to provide 100,000 shoes. This will be shoes that have been manufactured in Africa, Rick, that by Africans, that every time that shoes gets put on somebody, they'll remember that this shoe didn't come from China, this come from Africa, it came from Africa, and somebody will pay for these shoes so we can go wash this kids' feet that can go to school, or frontline healthcare workers. And this shoe is pretty unique because it's first of the kind in the world that has an organic antimicrobial to fight disease. It's eco-friendly, so at the end of the shelf life, when you bury in the ground, you'll biodegrade. But the NBA and the NBA Players Association, some of these guys, we're working with them to say, how can we team up to provide footwear so we can actually do exactly what you just said, this holy discontent that we said, it's unacceptable. So they want to partner with us and use this at their basketball clinics, at their basketball camps, and also in schools and healthcare pursuits all across Africa and the world to create a world with zero shoeless people.
Well, you think about it, how we talk about the volume, the 100,000 shoes here, the million shoes here. It was one pair of shoes with you. Who's the next Manny out there?
Rick, the crazy thing, I was at the UN General Assembly last year, and NBA Players Association teamed up with the Africa Diaspora Network to host an event. And my friend Erica Swiley, who is the president of the NBA Players Association Foundation, said, Manny, I want to introduce you to somebody. So I went to this meeting not knowing who in the world it is. And as I walked in, and Erica ushered me to go meet this young gentleman, and this 6'11" young man stood right in front of me. I said, my name is Manny Ohonme, and I'm founder and CEO of Samaritan's Feet. And he said, my name is Prestus Achua. I play for the New York Knicks. And he said, are you the same Manny Ohonme for Samaritan's Feet that's out of Charlotte, North Carolina? I said, yes. He said, I've been looking for you. He said, when I was in middle school in Nigeria, at a basketball clinic, a group from Samaritan's Feet came to our country in Nigeria, where you're from, and they washed my feet, gave me a pair of tennis shoes, and inspired me to dream. After that, I came to New York to come to high school, and Penny Attaway recruited me to go play for Memphis. And after that, I got drafted first round to go to the Toronto Raptors. He said, man, I want to tell you, I was one of your 11 million. I want to thank you because of your yes, my life has been impacted. And Rick, for the first time in my life, I couldn't even say a word. I had my mouth quiet. I said, how is that possible? But God knew. He knew.
God knew. Of course. I have told people this. Charlotte and I have been blessed by you that we have participated where we've had the chance to wash feet of children and give them shoes. And it's usually a mom will say, he wears a size 5. And we go, no, ma'am, he wears a 9. Just the last pair of shoes you bought him were a pair of 5.
Come on, that's so true.
And so a brand, clean socks, a brand new pair of shoes that actually fit. It is humbling. It is unbelievably spiritual. It becomes the blessing for the giver, not for the one that gets the shoe.
Come on.
It is. It's a blessing. This podcast is aimed at baby boomers in what I call the fourth quarter of our lives. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on today was there are people out there listening that can help you. So if I want to contribute to Samaritan's Feet, I want to be involved with Samaritan's Feet. I'm out there listening today. What can I do?
As simple as a gift, I tell people $1 a day, $30 will help us put a pair of shoes, not just one, but 2. One here in the United States, one internationally. As little as $30. And then you take it a step further. You say, I want to not just provide shoes. I want to be able to wear one of those shoes that's manufactured in Africa to your new world shoe. I want to buy those. You can go to theworldshoe.com and buy that pair of shoes, because when you buy that shoes or buy 10 or provide it for healthcare workers, teachers, people that actually have foot help, they're on their feet all the time, restaurant people, hospitality people all across the world in the United States. These shoes is the shoes for them. You can help do that, because when you contribute that, they have the tools for them to do their jobs. But more importantly, you helping to create jobs. Our factory in Ghana has created about 1,000 jobs, both directly and indirectly, to create opportunities for people. Plus the shoes they wear, it's helping to save people's life while being eco-friendly and friendly to the environment. So join us, help be a part of it. Come go with us. Sponsor one of this in your community. Sponsor one of these overseas. Go with us, go be a part of this, because your legacy could be to help us deliver on this promise, to help us create the world where there'll be zero shoeless people. It should be a holy discontent. You shouldn't feel comfortable knowing that in 2025, there's still people in our world, over 1 billion of them, that has diseases, that we can solve their problem by providing something basic as a pair of shoes that leads to the ability for them to go to school, to be able to work and go pursue their dreams.
Well, I want to remind people that grace of God is the reason I was born in the United States and was raised in the United States. That little child in Nigeria God loves that child as much as he loves me.
Amen.
And our job is to serve God by serving human beings, people. And there's nothing, again, more gratifying, more fulfilling than knowing that you're changing a child's life in some way. And it's not just the shoe, it's the message. You matter. Your life matters. Your journey matters. And you know, Manny, you're such a blessing. This story continues to be such a blessing in the world. And I'm just so grateful for our friendship. I'm so grateful you found time today. I know you're unbelievably busy right now to be part of our show today, and I can't thank you enough for being part of Chabot.
No, thank you, Rick. Thank you so much. And as I close, you said something that I want to live the audience by. And a good friend of mine, a mommy's reminded me of this. She said, service to others emancipates humanity from the dungeon of self. So if you want to understand true greatness, learn the power to serve others. And your life.
That's a great way to end. You're the best. You're my friend. I appreciate you. I love you.
Love you too, my brother.
It's now time for the boom. Have you heard the phrase, don't throw the baby out with the bath water? Meaning, look, you can get rid of bad things, but don't get rid of the good things at the same time. Now, let me tell you this. I pay and have paid a lot of taxes over the years. And I, like most Americans, don't like to see my tax money wasted. So I do appreciate some of the cuts that the Trump administration is doing right now. But I don't know what to believe anymore from the media. I just, candidly, I don't know what's good and what's bad, which is a bad thing. But I don't think it's smart to cut all of our foreign aid. I have lived abroad. I have seen what our money does. We cannot become isolationist again. I've been on a mission trip to Africa. I know what U.S. aid has done for people. We feed people, and if we don't feed people, they starve to death. And the thought of children starving to death because they can't grow food makes my stomach turn. We still, as a country, need to do the right thing. We have talked about American exceptionalism repeatedly on this podcast. Let's don't throw the baby out with the bath water. Let's continue to help people around the world, and that's the boom for the day. Okay, the song of the week. There was a woman who was a secretary, a young woman who was a secretary at Motown Music. Came every day, did files, did typing, did clerks. And one day, a female singer failed to show up for a recording session. And this secretary stood up and said she could sing that part. And you know what? She was right. Her name was and is Martha Reeves. And she quickly formed a group called Martha Reeves and the Vandellas. Later, after her career, and she still performs today, Martha Reeves does, she became a city councilwoman in Detroit. She's the great Martha Reeves, and the song is a great summer classic. It's called Heat Wave. It's now time to take a trip down memory lane. I told you I was going to tell you a story about a shrimp boat. So here's a great story. It's February of 1974, and I'm taking my girlfriend camping on the beach in Hunting Island, South Carolina. And that morning, I look over where I'd camped, and I saw that there was a pickup truck stuck in the sand. And an old man was trying to get spinning the tires and couldn't get it out. And I came over and said, "Do you need some help?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I got a board in the back of my truck, put it down, and can you help me?" And anyway, make a long story short, I helped get him out of the sand, get him back up on the pavement. And he said to me, my name is Norman Gay. I run a shrimp packing house and a bunch of shrimp boats. And if you ever need a job, come see me. Well, I went back to Georgia Southern and thought, wow, how romantic would it be to work on a shrimp boat in the summer? And so I showed up and said, "Mr. Gay, I'm here to work." And he put me to work. I went to work on a shrimp boat in the summer of 74. Great place, Frogmore, South Carolina, right next to Beaufort. Slept on the boat. A lot of palmetto bugs, which a lot of people call cockroaches, were on the boat, and probably wasn't the most sanitary place. But hey, I'm a college kid; it doesn't matter. And usually, I have a few beers before I'd go to bed that night, and allow me to sleep with the bugs. But it was a great summer working on the shrimp boat. The summer of '74. I still look back on it very nostalgically. A lot of pretty girls at the state park to date, a lot of great food to eat on the boat, a lot of good times. Summer of '74, trip down memory lane, and to honor that, I've got a great song today on the playlist called "The Summer Wind" by Frank Sinatra. It's time to get back on the road with Rick. Speaking of shrimp, I love fried shrimp. I love really great fried shrimp. There's a restaurant in the Ace Basin of South Carolina now in the town of Jacksonboro called the Ace Basin Fish Camp that does amazing, and I mean amazing, fried shrimp because it's all local shrimp right off the boat. Very, very fresh, light batter, crispy good, big portions, wonderful place. The Ace Basin is one of the most special places that I know of in the Low Country, anywhere in the country. It's called the Ace Basin because it is a region that has three intersecting rivers. The Ashepoo River, the Combahee River, and the Edisto Rivers all form this area that historically were largely rice plantations. And so they're marsh that were rice plantations that have now become part of a land trust and cannot be developed. And so it's really an American wilderness in the Low Country. It's a place that you all ought to visit. And when you visit, right in the heart of the Ace Basin is this little teeny town called Jacksonboro. And in that place is this wonderful restaurant, the Ace Basin Fish Camp on the Road with Rick. Speaking of the Low Country, one of my favorite and maybe the best American opera is an opera written by George Gershwin called Porgy and Bess. And one of the great songs from that opera is the song Summertime. And there's a version by an R&B singer, a beach music singer named Billy Stewart, Summertime by Billy Stewart, George Gershwin on our playlist today. It's now time for Wine and Wine. No wine today. No, we're at the beach. It's summertime. We're going to drink a Goombay Smash. Anybody ever had a Goombay Smash? This is a drink that came out of the Bahamas. It was created by a woman named Emily Cooper at the Blue Bee Bar in the Bahamas. I had the chance to go to the Bahamas a couple of times on a sailboat, bareboat charter on the Dolphin, where I took a group of people, organized a trip. Charlotte and I went on one of those trips when we were first dating. And we drink a lot of Goombay Smashes. It's made with dark rum, coconut rum, apricot brandy, and pineapple juice. It's good. It's good. It's good. So what's my whine today? How do you whine about summer? Well, it's too damn short. That's what I'm whining about. We've shrunk summer. When I was a kid, summer started after Memorial Day and didn't end till the day after Labor Day. Not now. Kids don't get out of school, and in many cases, till the middle of June, and they go back the 1st of August. What happened to summer? And let me tell you who gets hurt by that, the beach resorts, because so many of the beach resorts use high school labor. They use young people that work in the donut stands and the hot dog stands and making popcorn and all the kinds of things that you do at the boardwalk, and they get hurt. August used to be vacation month. Now it's school month, and that's the wine. It's time for the last word. The great author Henry James said this: summer afternoon, summer afternoon. To me, those have always been the two most beautiful words in the English language. I have to agree. Let's close today on the playlist with the great Don Henley classic, The Boys of Summer. We'll see you back here next week again on Shaboom.